Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a quick little discussion-y type of deal here on, well, kind of more of a post-completing the game thoughts here on Armored Core 6. Just to point this out, by the way, if you were one of those that was watching the original Blind Run, you might be wondering what happened. Like, the last episode here was just like, where was it? Like, right over here. Just like right at the very end of the attack the watch point bit. And then all of a sudden, you know, kind of already beaten all the missions in it, so what gives? Well, to make a very long story short, personal stuff happened. I'm not going to go into it. It's a long story. It was a grim week. I started recording episode 4, and then just that video ended up having technical issues, and then after that I just kind of sat down and kind of completed the entire thing. Now, I just wanted to kind of throw some 2 cents here in terms of what exactly... it's like just like thoughts about this game in general, because there is so much that they've done awesome in this game here. And if you're expecting a but to that, there is no but to that. This is in many ways the most Armored Core game to ever Armored Core, and it's the strangest thing here. Like, it seemed like their mentality going into this was like, what if we made an AC game? But then we just sort of made it with just bits and pieces that we've tried from throughout the entire series, but did them right this time. Like, did you want all the plot points that kind of seemed like they started off in AC1 and then kind of seemed like they... Like, you have the body horror aspects from the first generation. You have the third generation thing when it comes to... it's like pretty much everything from Silent Line is in here to some degree. You have the... did you ever want to play as an MT? Yeah, go figure. You can actually get a frame, you know, this one right here, that's basically an in-universe MT, more or less. So if you saw any of those posts asking how a manual fire only MT run is playing down the road, this is exactly why. Anyway, let's continue on. So, either way, did you want the cool movement tech, you know, the weird spins and drops and everything else of 5th gen? Yeah, you got that here too. Did you want the did you want the cool set pieces of 4th gen? Yeah, that's here too. Did you want the just the weird the weird hybrid stuff of second gen? Yeah, that's here too. Man, it's nice. There's just a little bit of everything here, and like I said, it's like the most Armored Core game to ever Armored Core. It's pretty awesome. But like legit, it feels like every plot point that they've tried through the whole series, they finally did right here. Like when Daemon X Machina was announced forever ago, I was thinking like what this story is what I expected that one to be. You know, where it was just like, so I expected them to go down the rabbit hole of all of the body horror stuff. Just all of the weird things that can come from all of these experiments and upgrades and whatever else that... Man, I'm just not hitting this guy at all. Good lord. All of these weird experiments and whatnot. Like, there's all these cool aspects to the series that always get brought up, and like you see the crazy guy in 1st gen that you're fighting on top of a tower, and he's just telling you don't get yourself augmented, everything's terrible, and then that never really comes up, you know, aside from that one other guy at the train. Or when we were talking about the weird, surreal, like, alien aspects that come up every now and then, but they don't quite, like, delve into it that much. Yeah, Manual Fire is going to be a weird freaking run. This is still practice time. I'm still figuring out all the placements for everything. Anyway. Yeah, like, they explore all of it here in really, really cool ways. Like, I've been looking over a lot of the lore deep dives and stuff, and yeah, it's... Every time, everyone's got a different take on it, and that just feels good, you know? Anyway. So yeah, as far as that stuff is great. I saw some complaints about the lack of... about extensions and things, which I'm glad to see that didn't necessarily come up. Pretty much the entire insides and extension category became other things. Like, personally, I love what they did with the weapons in this. Not necessarily... Like, I love having additional parts and everything. But the way that it's set up in a way that you still have the functions of those old parts, you just don't necessarily have those exact parts. So, like, instead of extensions and then missile extension pods and stuff like that, you have this... Here, can I actually make it up that wall? I don't think I can. You have this system where you just have multiple different missile launchers with those extensions built in. Or, for example, instead of... Instead of something like the coolers and radiator bits and whatever else, which have never once functioned properly. They have those built in elsewhere. Instead of something like assault armor being a function of your core itself, it's something you can build into anything. You can have your 4th gen shields. You can have your emergency shields, which I personally consider not even an armored core thing, but more of a risk of rain thing. It reminds me of one-shot protection. Like, personally, that's the one that I like running. You still kind of have the ACS tuning from 4th gen, but it's OS tuning this time around. And you can't actually max out the entire thing by the time you get to the end. So actually, come to think of it, I forgot to reset the OS tuning for this thing, which means actually I should be able to just kick this guy. Or wait, maybe I did. Maybe I did remember to reset the tuning. Who knows? Anyway, it sounds overpowered at first. It's a nice little crutch at your first time through, and then you realize it's aside from the boost kick, like it's funny how the cheapest thing on the list is probably the most game-changing one on there. Let's see. As far as difficulty goes, it's like pretty standard not Dark Souls. It's pretty standard Armor Core difficulty, where you start off with a ton of challenge at the start. And actually, the way that the parts are balanced out really made me think of Silent Line there as well. Like a lot of bits of this really made me think of Silent Line, from the way that they handled the harder missions to the way that they handled a lot of kind of changes during the mission. The helicopter mission especially reminded me of it, like the helicopter stealth mission. But then especially like the part balance, where you start off with a bunch of absolute garbage for the most part, and like it feels terrible at the time, and then you don't get any parts until a few missions in, really. So it kind of gives you this thing where you're trying to experiment with just these weird builds and whatever else. You start appreciating these hidden parts that you're maybe finding a little bit more. In this case, it's more so than the arena. They end up finding those parts. I will say there's only one thing from previous games that they actually have not included in this one that kind of bugs me a little bit, which is ammo counts on AI units. So, like, for example, whenever going and fighting these bosses here for manual fire and whatever else, one of the go-to things for previous entries in the series was... why am I having a... That's weird. I'm having some lag on my boosts. I'm not sure if that's a mechanic or what. Anyway, so either way, one of the things that you could do is just run them out of a lot of their heavier weapons, since, for these runs I typically run a reasonably high shell defense, but then sucky everything else build. In this case, it's literally just going to be trash. But either way, they don't actually run out of ammo, interestingly enough, which I guess makes sense, since most of your ammo realistically probably wouldn't run out in a normal sense, so why would that be kept, But either way, it was just a little bit of a weird thing. Aside from that, like the scale of the fights, the scale of the maps, the interesting places they take the story, the interesting twists in the story for that part, like the final ending. I mean, personally, I feel like the most canon route in my mind was the I guess people are just calling it the destruction ending, but the fires ending. Like that's the one that I went with my first time, and I thought, like, yeah, that honestly, realistic choice would definitely go for something like that. Because I'm sorry, sentient frickin' electronics or just no bueno, no thank you. I mean, it's funny for all the memes that people were making over, like, oh, you get your girlfriend living in your head. Like, you do realize how horrible of a situation that is, right? That sounds terrifying. You cannot escape to the other room if you're in trouble. It's like, dang it, I'm sorry, I didn't get to the dishes. Why didn't you get to the dishes? I can see you miles away. I am in your brain. That sounds terrifying. Anyway. So yeah, as far as all that stuff's concerned, it's the places that they go with the story are really interesting. The settings really darn fun. And I love how the New Game Plus, instead of the standard hard mode, like I would have loved to see a hardcore mode come back, but I do really, really like how they did it, where just basically the entire game changes on you, where you literally are not even getting the complete story until you've played it 3 times through. And even then, you may not have seen all the outcomes, Like, I love stories that branch off in different ways, but that just felt good. Man. So let's see, what else did they do? Like, in general, the story branches, the way that it redoes things, it feels like Last Raven done right, where, you know, there's a lot of potential different outcomes that can come from this story. But realistically speaking, you know what route you're going to do ahead of time, probably. And in this case, it locks you into a particular route before you really get into it. Like, your first two are up to you which endings you want to go with, but then your third one is a bit more obvious, where you get new choices. I mean, it's pretty obvious, like, hey, this cool new variant of this mission is here, maybe I should probably do that. But either way, like, you're just basically given new choices every time you go through, and that feels good. It's a really cool way of doing it. I really like that in terms of storytelling. I feel more games need to probably do that more often, because it's just a dang fun time. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm doing manual fire with these rifles, the general idea here is to get something that feels very similar to the small rockets in earlier generations, which is exactly what these rifles do. Feels very good. And yeah, general play-wise, you can probably guess it feels fantastic. Movement-wise, like, all the different leg types feel very different. I would have liked to see more leg types, but oh well. Actually, on that note, it would have been nice to see. There's one particular route that I want to see for a DLC if they do it. If they decide to do additional story routes, which I hope they do, just make this the new, like, Silent Line meets Last Raven. Just do it. Anyway, so if that's what they end up doing, I really, really, really would like to see the G1 route. I just want to see Balaam win. Like, I don't give a crap about the company. I just want to see just the Red Guns win it. Like, that was the route that I was hoping for the first time through, and I'm pretty sure the way that they have it all set up, the way that they even have other people react to what happens to all the Red Guns and everything, which I guess minor spoilers, but whatever. What are you doing here? I'm sure if you care, you probably have already gotten it. Anyway, so as far as that goes, like, I'd love to see them kind of get their own DLC at some point. Wait, can I just back boost to get this guy instead of doing all these fancy tricks? Probably not. I mean, it's just gonna ricochet from that range anyway. Anyway, yeah, doing these manual fire is it can get tricky. So you figure out the angles that you can hit stuff at, and then you just kind of keep practicing until eventually you can get it while dodging at the same time. It takes a while. Also, I forgot to use my repairs. Anyway, it's cool though. It finally gives certain bosses that I'm surprised so many folks apparently had to struggle with this boss. This guy is. I mean, I think I maybe lost him once when I was originally playing through it, and then he just went down like a total chump, because all you got to do is stagger him, and then he's toast.
You see that? That's the watch point.
Do I see it? No, I'm staring at the sky, dude. That sky looks pretty. Let's see, what else did they do? Oh yeah, in terms of the map design, like, man, there were so many little details I loved on the maps. Just all kinds of little design details all over the frickin' place. Where, like, let's say, I think probably the Snowy Wind Farm is probably my favorite, where there's absolutely no reason that anybody would have needed to design this, like, fancy wind farm that just lives inside of a cliffside, but I just enjoyed the prettiness of that thing. Let's see, in general, the fights feel very frenetic and everything else. The multiplayer certainly happens. It's definitely a bit of a chaotic experience, but hey, if you've experienced Armored Core before, like, if you were here during the heyday of 4th gen and stuff like that, this is 100% going to be your jam. If you loved the stabby kind of like stabby multiplayer of 5th gen, like just all of the ambushes and melees and whatever else, you'll probably love it here. Definitely, if you loved blade tracking builds, good lord, are you eating pretty in this particular instance? Because getting around blade tracking is a huge part of multiplayer as far as I've seen. Actually, it's funny, it's funny that currently the kind of most overpowered weapons, it's funny because they have their own balances already set up to some degree. Like, I've seen a lot of folks complaining about, like, the Zimmermans and stuff like that, which, yeah, they're a bit nutty when it comes to multiplayer and stuff like that. But all things considered, it's kind of constantly balanced to my thought of, like, just finally seeing this moment that I'm assuming the devs had too, of like, oh my goodness, the alloy shotguns finally had their day. They finally got a chance. They got a chance to live. I'm sure they'll get nerfed into the ground just like they did every other time, but still, they finally had a chance. Like, as somebody who really enjoyed the visuals of the alloy shotguns in like Last Raven and stuff like that, or just like late 3rd gen in general, I'm sure I can't be the only one that was just kind of happy to see them have their heyday, even if they are annoying to fight against. You got stuff like stun needle launchers that are a bit of a pain, but truth be told, they're so freaking heavy that usually whatever you're fighting is slow enough that you can hit them back just fine. It just means that if folks are over-reliant on their pulse shields, then they're going to have a bit of a problem, because they're not exactly as crazy against everything else, which, I'll be honest, haven't really run into that problem, because I always run terminal armor, which, like, again, you can run either like a assault armor, like a primal armor kind of thing, or you can run your shield, or you can run a emergency shield that lasts a little bit longer, but only pops when you're at 1 AP. So this basically means that you can, whenever there's multiplayer, because there's respawning this time, you have those situations where you can actually like survive 1 extra hit and then go back for those big stabs and whatnot. Just feels good, you know? Also, I'm getting real sloppy with these shots because I'm just imagining multiplayer now. But yeah, you definitely run into some really annoying builds, though. If you remember the stun locking and ECM builds and whatever else, if you've ever played Silent Line on multiplayer, you got that in spades, because they got like stun guns, they got stun cannons. Here, let's see what else they got. I personally really love this thing where they got like missile launchers that are basically just on a gun and it fires like 30 of them at a time, except they hang in the air and lag for a second and then chase after somebody. I love how the Coral rifle is basically the frickin' Cascade range gun. I love how the Kurosawa has multiple phases for its big charge up thing and is stupid heavy again. Hell, I love how the one and only laser pistol has lasted the entire game and has been just the best of every laser pistol, except there's just one this time, so you gotta love that. So far, it's cool how every one of these charge-up weapons has had its own thing. This thing, people hate this thing. Basically, it just micro-stuns with every shot. This is literally like the first-gen handgun. So, just stun, 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 have a nice day. So yeah, lots of little fun callbacks going on there, and yeah, I mean there's just weapons aplenty for everything that you like. Sure, you got the same old of like, if you've played an Armored Core game before, did you know you can make a tank with a shitload of gigantic guns and it's gonna kill stuff real good, almost like that's the point? Yeah, you can do that. Oh no, my poor balance, my heart is gonna break. It's funny to see people freak out about the cannons. Like, dude, this is the point. It's been like that since forever. What are you complaining about? I do love that the frame that you start off with, this like the AC-2000 there, is basically the or CC2, or sorry, HC-2000, whatever, the 2000. We'll just call it the 2000 series. I love how this thing is basically the lightweight from AC3 and Silent Line. Very kind of minor thing there, but I love how it's practically that same look. Like, you've got more or less the chicken head. You got the lightweight core, you got the big wide arms there, and then the legs, I mean, you'd basically just have to technically swap them out with, like, would it even be these ones? I feel like, honestly, the ones you start with are almost exactly the same ones, because, I mean, maybe these ones? I'd have to go double check and look at it. Either way. I love how we actually got howitzers back, but they're in different slots now. So, like, you got spread bazookas and stuff like that making a comeback. But here, they had the spread bazooka. Where was the howitzer? Left arm howitzer. The howitzers have not been a thing in a... Well, technically they came back in 5th gen, but also not really at that point. But, like, it made me unreasonably happy to see that they had a napalm gun again. Like, yay! My handheld war crimes are back. Again, unreasonably happy about something like that, but still, it's just cool to see this stuff make a comeback, you know? Let's see. Flamethrowers made a comeback. I don't think the flamethrowers ever left. I can't remember if they had flamethrowers in 5th gen. I want to say no, but they also had thermal as its own type. I don't know. It was primarily like pile bunkers and like heavy machine guns and sniper cannons there. So either way, it's cool to see how they handled the balance in this one when it comes to this whole stagger mechanic. Where in a lot of cases you'll be equipping weapons specifically for being able to break break a unit into a stagger. Like some weapons are going to be better at dealing overall damage, others are going to be better at breaking posture, and it's a nice way to take the old like stunning mechanic that's been there from the very beginning and then turning it into something more fun. Where you're basically going and specifically breaking their posture, and then you're going in for those big hits, and it just feels super meaty when you go and pull it off, you know. So I've been loving that part. Let's see what else. As far as the missile types, they finally added swarmers of various varieties, which made me very happy. Like, let's say when we... Actually, let me just go ahead and load up my... Let me load up the one that I liked the most. So, it's funny because they say that in many of these games you're going to start off with your build that you like right from the get-go, and you'll just basically rock that same build throughout the entire run. And, you know, that's exactly what I did with this one. I had my little lightweight reverse joint with a little dinky pistol, and then I saw that there was a, you know, basically the Hunter Axe from Bloodborne or the Halberd from Souls or whatever else, but it finally got to make it into Armored Core, so, you know, that feels good. It's the way that they work kicks into the mechanics feels very nice. Actually, he's a little bit too far away, probably. There, yeah. There we go. But you got all this fun, dodgy gameplay and stuff like that. And you can do locked or unlocked. You get more precise, obviously, when you're playing unlocked like this, where if you're able to manually track it, your weapons will track better. And this is actually really fun because it gives a very fun three-dimensional feeling to the whole thing. And I've been loving this trend of seeing... kind of seeing games do this thing where they're trying to bring the previous high-level experience down to kind of an acceptable level that everybody can get a hold of to some degree with a lot of games now. Where, like, let's say whenever doing Rocket only of early 3rd gen and stuff like that, there was oftentimes this feeling that you had to have this 360-degree awareness at all times in order to just sort of pop shot your shots here. And in some ways, that's exactly what this ends up achieving. They dealt with the old blade spam issue, where, like, back in 4th and 5th, or sorry, everything up to 4th gen, they had this thing where you wouldn't quite be able to deal with blade spam. Sometimes, like, if you got cornered, you might be able just to get shanked to death, more or less. And so they increased their power, they made them slower to use in 5th gen. This time around, they changed it slightly so that there's more of a cooldown. But they hit way harder. Like you saw right there, that just basically took off a gigantic chunk of his AP there, because he was gone and staggered from the previous hit. This guy takes exceptionally heavy stagger. And many of the fights are designed in very particular ways. Like, there's a fight right before this that I personally... To many, it's been free training. To me, it's just a personal source of trauma, but the tester AC. Or the sample AC. It's a guy that you fight right before this, or a little bit before this. It's just your first AC fight. And it's funny because this guy is kind of non-threatening. That's why a lot of people use him for testing. But for the purpose of testing that manual fire only run, the guy is exceptionally shell resistant and also exceptionally exceptionally well stacked for ammo, as in they don't run out, because, you know, they don't run out of ammo in this one, which, again, I know it sounds like I'm complaining about that one. I just want to reiterate, this is a problem that no one realistically has. Because in a lot of cases in older gens, you would have to specifically use the ammo trick only because you would run into those situations where, like, you'd be... oh, wait, I didn't actually break the thing, did I? Where you'd have, what's it, like a guy that basically just has a bunch of grenade cannons or whatever else, and you can't actually end up getting away from those grenade cannons, and so you'd end up, let's say, using the ammo thing to just run them out of ammo so that you can actually get close and do your thing. But anyway, so it's not really a thing this time around. Also, one other thing I want to point out, because I love going on tangents for no apparent reason, When it comes to the Balteus, you may have noticed that this will probably end up taking only one attempt, whereas previously when I was going and doing this blind, it took quite a few. This isn't exclusively because of the nerf. You get a ton of upgrades. I mentioned those OS upgrades earlier over the course of the run. Also, at the time, I wasn't making use of the boost kick, which just absolutely destroys this guy. Honestly, he should be a sales pitch for the boost kick. Anyway. So anyways, yeah, there were a lot of things that changed since last time, but I noticed overall the actual fight itself feels freaking amazing, as it always did. I think this is probably my favorite tutorial fight in the game. But anyway, what I was saying earlier about the deafening student guy, the cool thing about that fight is that he is designed in many ways like a freaking Onyx. I don't know if any of y'all happen to be fans of the Pokemon games or whatever, but essentially they had a really cool thing that they forever made a particular unit in that game more or less competitively non-viable by creating it as a boss fight, which was the Onyx at the very start. It's the first boss that you run into, well, technically speaking anyway. And so with that boss fight, they made it so that the guy is extremely defensive against the things that do the most DPS at that time, and then is just functionally worthless against everything else, but also extremely weak to its weaknesses. So, in that particular case, it was ground and rock, so if you brought water or grass, it taught you very quickly, oh, hey, this absolutely shreds. I should probably be paying attention to this mechanic. And it does that job exceptionally well as a tutorial, So they essentially did the same thing with that student there, where to many first-timers, they probably had a bit of a hard time on that fight, because they would let's say, they'd be going through it their first time there, and they'd end up having a hard time landing any damage on the guy, because he's got exceptionally high defenses. He's got, here, let's go ahead and slap this guy real quick. So he's got exceptionally high defenses, he's got pretty decent movement overall, and on top of that, he's got kind of pressure weapons aplenty. He's got a burst rifle, he's got slow firing accurate missiles and stuff. So either way, it's good stuff. But they did the same thing with that student here, where basically the guy goes from a interesting first-timers boss fight that nobody will admit dying to that thing that you're using for training, because, it was this thing that was a challenge and now isn't. And so many of the early bosses are designed in this way. Actually, in many ways, it feels like the Balteus was also supposed to be designed in that same way. Because I know ever since coming back here, after that first win, I have not lost to this guy since, underpowered AC or not. And it's just, I've heard somebody say that many of the bosses are designed in such a way that you just kind of elevate yourself to a whole new level personally upon completing them, that it's just this completely different experience that you weren't used to. And that's what this game's got in spades. So either way, I gotta get going, though. This was just my 2 cents on this whole thing. This game is incredible. It may be missing a few things that some of the older ones had, like you technically don't have some of the slots. Technically, stuff like optional slots, again, you can max out all of them by the end. But I just want to point out for context, if you're thinking, because I swear there's someone like this in every comment, you're thinking oh, I'm just going to max it all out. It's going to be too easy for me. Hold on, let me just rub over here, because it's gonna it's just I gotta feel something. Okay, you basically get maybe half of these over the course of your first playthrough. You have to complete New Game Plus to be able to actually get a hold of the full list of all of these upgrades, and even then, you gotta go quite a decent ways to get all of them. For the most part, for the first playthrough, you're basically just going to be picking the stuff that you like, and then you pay a cost to reset them. So in this particular case, I'm going to end up resetting them so that I can do the whole manual fire only run without upgrades. But I don't want to waste the money on it right now. We'll get to that later. Here, let me double check if that's actually happening today. Are we actually doing that run today, or it's going to be Tactics Ogre? I'm pretty positive, yeah. I was really expecting that the more folks would immediately go for this thing. It seemed like the most masochistic, and usually those are the ones that win those polls. Anyway, alright, so that will be about that for the time being. Y'all have yourselves a good one. I'll see you when I see you, and thank you for stopping by. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them. I feel like this probably more or less conveyed what I was trying to say about this game. It's a really, really, really darn good experience. It's a very finely crafted thing. And if somebody asked me where should I get into the Armored Core games from, this would probably be where I'd tell them to go. Either this or AC3. Just because it's such a different experience. Not like compared with the rest of the series. In many ways, it's exactly what the rest of the series was trying to do, but they finally did all of those things right. Actually, screw it. You know what? Hold on. One more thing. I want to go down the mission list real quick, just to see about showing some examples here. So, spoilers, obviously. Like, artillery installations definitely is just kind of your standard one. Cleanup is your standard one. Helicopters, again, most of these are pretty standard AC-type missions. Destroying the tester AC, there's plenty of these throughout the entire series, but the way that this is designed is far better than usual. As far as the weaponized colony ship, this is basically Spirit of Motherwell on crack, where you can't just instantly go and blade off the legs and fly away, which that was always hilarious. As soon as people started realizing that the fastest way to S-rank, like killing the frickin' Giga Boss that's on the box art, was to just run up and chop the legs off, it was hilarious. In this particular case, they even have you start off with chopping off one of the legs, and then they just start detaching the legs. Like, yeah, you think we didn't think of that? Of course we did. I love how they end up bringing the thing back with alternate mission variants with every time you play through. Oh my goodness, this one was something else. If you didn't think that they could bring bone wheels into Armored Core, you haven't been paying attention. As far as Wall Climber, it's your standard kind of long mission. This reminded me of... hell, every AC game has one of these, if you think about it. Probably the ones that come to mind the most are just to access I think it was the Crest raid in AC3, or it's just whenever Union's raiding the factory. But in this particular case, the actual deaths already happened beforehand. You can't go and betray other people on the mission to advance your way in the arena or anything like that. All of that stuff you can do in New Game Plus. Well, to varying degrees, but I do love how in this particular one you do find out what happened to one of the previous teams that went in there. Though, one thing to point out, as far as the betrayals go, it sounds like they're just some scripted nothing thing. They actually do react to the way that you do stuff. A lot of characters will react to very specific things about the way that you've done stuff. So either way, definitely worth doing those betrayals sometimes just to see the reactions. This one I thought was like a just bizarro, like we gotta talk about how cool Rusty is kind of mission first time through, and then this one again just started having more and more implications with every new playthrough. And I didn't quite I could tell there was something there, but didn't quite put together until I was watching a lore thing while working last night, or listening to a lore thing, I should say. And I was like, oh shoot, that's what all of this meant this whole time. The pieces were right there. It's just cool, Then you again have New Game Plus alternate scenarios for some of these things. When I hear folks complain that the thing wasn't long enough, this is pretty long for an AC game. I mean, usually you can complete an Armored Core 3 or like a Silent Line to some degree in AC2, like 1 or 2 sit-downs. Technically speaking, in this case, I would say it's more of like a 2 or 3. Even if you're going on a build that's like going for super overpowered S ranks or whatever else. I do love that most of the S ranks, at least, are based on speed. There are some that are a bit inconsistent in terms of the actual requirements to get them. Additionally, New Game Plus will actually give you new requirements for some of them. It's like Dam Complex. You have 2 different versions of this particular one, where one of them has the choice and one of them doesn't, that will have different requirements despite the fact that they're more or less the same mission. There aren't that many duplicates, surprisingly enough. There are kind of flipped scenarios in some cases for different playthroughs and whatnot, but overall, pretty much every one of them, in terms of where stuff's hidden, in terms of just figuring all this stuff out on the fly without needing a guide, I feel like almost all of it was absolutely spot on. I think Regain Control Asylum was probably... mechanically, it's the only one that to me felt a bit like bullshit, but for everything else throughout the entire game, which is freaking impressive, it's just felt unbelievably natural in terms of just kind of picking it up and going, So that stuff has felt awesome. Let's see. Oh yeah, these are just different versions of the Convergence mission. Again, not too many copies. I think there's like 3 or 4 missions that are copies, only because they have different, like, in one case you'll be ambushed by one guy, in another case you'll be ambushed by another guy, but they do give you a choice to pick the bigger variants as you go through. And the minor stuff, sometimes it'll default if you're going, default to a particular thing if you're going through a replay or whatnot. But the amount of different types of missions, like, this is what I was talking about earlier right here with the cool designs for a lot of these areas where there's just a bunch of these, like a bunch of these wind turbines and like all these little hexagons in between there. I feel like I've seen something like that in real life. But that stuff's felt great. The amount of customization that you have to your AC is frankly top notch. I saw somebody post a thing the other day that if you've seen that head that the poster AC uses that has that visor on there that'll flip down, you can actually even customize that visor to have like sunglasses on and stuff like that. It can be whatever you'd like. In this particular case, I just wanted to show this off. Like, I just love this design. This looks so freaking cool, you know? Anyway, so we'll go ahead and quit that mission real quick. I just wanted to show how cool that looked. For every little bit in the story that you complete, you actually get another little sticker for your AC, which I appreciated. Here, let me see about pulling up my... I just feel like blazing through the story run. And yes, I know I got the colors wrong for the pulverizer. At a certain point, I was just like, screw it, it's close enough. So when you have those situations where you just feel like crushing something, that's when you go in with your super overpowered builds and whatever. Do we just want to eliminate this guy? Maybe not. In general, the objectives and stuff felt pretty forgiving. There are a few cases that you can tell the devs were chuckling. There's a lot of cases where it feels like you can't sequence break, but you actually can. Like if you specifically know where to go. I mean, I saw some folks saying that you couldn't sequence break anymore, which this is the same amount of sequence breaking, same amount of scripting as always. The one thing that they've changed from previous entries in terms of the scripting, especially for bosses, is just their phases. That most bosses will have at least 2 phases, wherein occasionally they'll have a thing where, like you saw earlier with the Balteus, where when it's halfway dead, it'll decide that, okay, it's time for my plot shield to happen. And then it'll just pop a particular kind of shield on top of itself in order to suddenly become invincible. Now, I want to point out, despite some reviews saying that this was always something that would happen, it actually wasn't. Something that I saw while testing it repeatedly was that you would be able to actually knock it through its different phases in very particular ways in order to actually get around that shield. So if you kept stagger locking it past those phases, you absolutely would not have that problem. Granted, it's difficult to keep those knockbacks going, but still, if you can do it in the most lightweight of lightweights, you can definitely do it in something a bit more serious. That's again what I really like about this thing. That's in all of these missions, you eventually will figure out places where you can just cheese the ever-loving Christ out of the mission in question. Where you can just specifically remember how to get around certain places, how to find stuff. Like, they're going to pop a shield here in a moment. But like I was noticing a while ago that you can just skip taking a lot of damage and fighting your way through this entire thing by just hovering over it, over in this direction. There we go. And we'll just go ahead and pass through the shield this way. I never actually did see how that one guy managed to get through this doing no damage for that particular part. I don't know. Anyway, still though, like, the one thing I will say that I feel like multiplayer kind of sorts out when it comes to the one-on-one AC fights, oftentimes feeling like it's about pinning the other guy down more so than necessarily always outmaneuvering them. It's not always the case, and this feels like a weird thing to bring up in general. So, like, for example, let's say you're playing your AC3s or your silent lines, and oftentimes it'd be like, okay, how can I get behind this guy to go inflict my damage there? Whereas in many cases with your builds here, you'd be running something like, okay, how do I get my big damage punchy move to go and murderize that guy right there? So like right here, I have a bunch of missiles that will all lag fire to hopefully land at the same time that the cannon lands its shot, putting him into a stagger, meaning he can't use his repair kits, meaning that the punch and kick combo can then go ahead and finish him off, because the kick will extend his stagger time, his the punch will essentially hit him multiple times with that multiplied stagger damage, and, away he goes. But everyone's got some version of this that they find really cozy to use. And this doesn't mean that it's always going to work in every scenario either. Pretty much any build, well, that is to say that to work the same way. Sometimes you have those same tools and they're just applied in different ways. So like whenever going and doing the final boss there, or one of the final bosses there, here, how do I... the way that this thing ended up changing is that I was actually using the punch for more of a stagger to make the missiles do the damage rather than the other way around. And funnily enough, this is what I was originally trying to show earlier, that you get little badges that you can combine in with all of your stuff. So like in this case, you get the Stargazer for completing all the missions, and then Analysis Complete technically for doing all of the missions. I just thought it was particularly funny because this guy's always just basically giving somebody a laser colonoscopy, so, if somebody's staring at Analysis Complete once that happens, that's just hilarious. And of course, gotta have the logo for the one faction you can't save, dang it. Anyway, so that was my extended scattered thoughts on this whole thing. Is it good? Hell yeah. If you haven't gotten it already, go get it. Anyway, y'all have yourselves a good one. This game's fantastic. And I really, really hope that we get to see more AC in the future. Alright, take care.